The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the QATV staff or board of directors. QATV, in compliance with FCC regulations, is prohibited from exercising control over the content of independent, member-produced public access programming.
Hello folks, I'm attorney Tom Williams and welcome to Sound Advice. Today we're going to talk a little bit about estate planning, but we're going to talk a lot about trust. And when I say trust, I want to talk about the documents that we call trust. And basically there are two types of trust, revocable and irrevocable. And I had a client say to me yesterday, Attorney Williams, what's the difference between an irrevocable trust and a revocable trust? And I said, well, the irrevocable trust starts with IR. And that wasn't quite the answer he was looking for. What it's all about, folks, is an irrevocable trust means just what the title says. It's irrevocable. Once you start it, you can't change it. This is the document can't be changed. So let's say in my situation, I have a wife and I have 4 children. And let's say I make up a trust that says that an irrevocable trust, saying that one of my children are the trustees, and it goes to my whatever's in that trust goes to my 4 other children. And then let's say a year or two goes by, and I'm not happy with the trustee that I appointed. Maybe I want to make another trustee, one of the other children, or maybe I want to change the beneficiaries. Maybe one of my children have a problem, or maybe one of my children are in the middle of divorce, or maybe one of my children have gotten in trouble with a controlled substance, or maybe I don't want to leave anything to my children anymore. I want to give it to my grandchildren, or maybe I want to give it to some charitable institution. Well, irrevocable says I can't change it. Whatever I put in writing, whatever I did, I can't change. So you have to be careful when you put something in an irrevocable trust. And you'd say, well, Tom, why would you ever put anything in an irrevocable trust to begin with? Well, there's basically 3 reasons. One is for asset protection. Let's say that I'm a contractor or somebody that's out there that might be sued. You know, there's contractors seem to get sued a lot, and there's doctors and somebody in the medical profession, police officers. There's certain trades that get sued a lot, nurses. There's certain trades they get sued a little more than other trades. And you say, well, and you own something nice. Let's say you own a nice house down Cape Cod and you want to keep it in the family. Well, you might want to establish an irrevocable trust, have the property owned by your children, have one of your children or one of your friends or something as the trustee. And if somebody ever sued you, they can't get it because you don't own it. It's not yours, it's the children's, and it's somebody else is the trustee. So that's asset protection. That's you own something or you did own something, you transferred it to this trust that you have no control over. And if you have no control over, if somebody sues you, they can't get it. So that's one reason people would use a irrevocable trust for what they call asset protection. Another item that I've used an irrevocable trust for many times is, let's say somebody owns some real estate and they want that real estate for the rest of their life. They want to own it. Maybe it's a very nice piece of, it's a nice block of stores that's given them a nice income their whole life. Maybe they got it from their father and they want to keep this block of stores and they like to keep it in the family. But they don't want to have it included in their estates, or they don't want to have the appreciation of it. Let's say this block of stores is worth $1 million right now, and the person that owns it is 60 years old. Well, by the time they die, if they die when they're 90, that block of stores might be worth $3 million, $4 million. And what the person is concerned with, they say, well, if they have a lot of other properties, maybe their estate will get so high in its category of the amount of money that the estate has, maybe they'll be subject to an estate tax that will be very, very expensive for the family. So they can say, well, look, I can transfer this property to an irrevocable trust so it's owned by my children or somebody else, so I don't own it anymore. It's not includable in my estate anymore. Now, the value of it may be deducted from your estate tax exclusion. So right now there's an estate tax exclusion of $5 million. So if I gave away $1 million to some irrevocable trust, what that would mean is that when I die, my exclusion would only be $4 million. But if that property, by the time I died, appreciated to $3 million, I would save my estate $2 million worth of valuation for estate taxes. And if you have a piece of property, the prime example in something like this is, let's say that you have a beautiful piece of property down there in Hyannisport, right next to the Kennedys. You like living down there, you got a sailboat, the whole family likes living down there. You inherited it from your great-grandfather. You had this property forever in the family, and you don't intend to sell it. You want to keep it in the family. You want it to go to your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. You want everybody to have the ability to enjoy this beautiful piece of oceanfront property. And that piece of property gets more expensive every year because, as we all know, folks, God only made so much oceanfront property. Well, in a situation like that, you might want to give the property to your children or your grandchildren while you're alive in the form of an irrevocable trust, so you can't get it back, but you get it out of your estate. So if that property appreciates, and we all know oceanfront property will appreciate, unless the ocean gets too high, that it might depreciate. But most oceanfront property during our lifetime will appreciate. So you put that $1 million piece of property in this trust, and then when you die, anything over $1 million is not going to be considered in your estate. And as we all know, real estate, you can think back. Just think back. I can think back to 1976. I purchased a home for $53,000. That exact same house in 2004 went for $530,000. It went up 10 times. It went up 10 times in 30 years. So no one has a really good crystal ball to say what's going to happen if I have something that's worth $1 million today. Is it going to be worth $10 million in 30 years? We don't know. But if you're concerned about keeping it out of your estate, put it in an irrevocable trust, have it owned by somebody else that's out of your estate. And today's a good time to do this, folks, because we have a $5 million gift we can give. People don't realize this. I can give away $5 million this year, and my spouse can give away $5 million, and there's no tax on me, and there's no tax on the person that receives it. Now, we don't know what's going to happen to the federal gift tax laws after this coming election. But right now, the law is that husband and wife can give away $5 million apiece, and that's over and above the $13,000 that they can give everybody that they've ever met. Okay, so that's quite an exclusion. The final thing that people use irrevocable trust for, and this is what most of the regular citizens use, because most of the regular citizens don't have that beautiful home down there in Hyannisport or someplace where they want to, give something to their children or grandchildren. But lots of people do this. When people get in their late 60s, early 70s, they take their property, the house they're living in usually, they put it in an irrevocable trust. So the house is owned by the children own the house. But Ma and Dad keep what they call a life estate on the property. That means that they have a right to live there their whole life and nobody can take it away. Why do they do that? The reason they do it, number one, the kids will get a stepped up tax basis when the parent dies. So if the house is worth $300,000 today, and when the parent dies, it's worth $700,000, then the kid, when he gets the house and he goes to sell it, his tax basis is $700,000. So that life estate works out good for that. The life estate makes sure that Ma and Dad will always have a place to live. If the kids lose their houses by gambling or divorce or lawsuits, Ma and Dad still have a place to live. So the life estate is sort of vital for Ma and Dad. It's vital for the child too because it gives them a stepped-up basis. But they put it in an irrevocable trust because if you go into a nursing home and if you go there and you apply for Medicaid and it's 5 years after, more than 5 years after you put the property in the irrevocable trust, Medicaid will not put a lien against what they call the remainder interest of the property. So the house is saved. The house will go to your children or your grandchildren or whoever you want it to go to a charity even. It will go to somebody other than as a reimbursement to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for expenses they paid in your elderly care. So those are the reasons people use irrevocable trust, and that's what an irrevocable trust is. Now, if I put property in an irrevocable trust, can I ever get it back? That's a big question. I had someone come in this morning and say, well, Tom, I like the idea of that irrevocable trust, but and my wife and I think that we'll live in the house we're going to be living in for the rest of our life, and we're both going to, die in this house. But we don't know. Maybe we're going to go to an assisted living in the future. Maybe we want to go to some kind of senior citizen complex. Maybe we want to move out of Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Maybe we want to find some nice retirement place somewhere else. So we think we want to live in our house our whole life, but we may want to sell it. If we want to sell it, what can we do? Well, if you put it in an irrevocable trust, and let's say the trustees are lack of another word, friendly with you, that they're willing to work with you, you could say, well, look, I want to sell the house. I'd like the house sold because I want to buy another house, let's say in Florida. Well, they could sell it, the house in the trust, keep the cash in the trust, and buy a new house in Florida. You can do that. That's permissible. There's nothing transferred out of the trust. Another thing you could do, if all the beneficiaries agree, you could take the trust assets and deed it back to mom and dad. It may be a little bit of a gift tax. There's no tax to be paid. In theory, what would happen is this. Let's say if the house is worth $400,000 and you had 4 children, each of those children would have to deduct $100,000 from their $5 million exemption that they have for their federal estate taxes when they die. That should be no big deal. So consequently, they could deed the house back to mom and dad could do whatever they want to do with it. Now, when do you have to be pretty careful about an irrevocable trust that you're living in and you're doing it for Medicaid purposes? Well, if you have some children and if you've got some that you're really unsure if they would do what you would like them to do, if you wanted to sell your home, maybe they wouldn't go along with it. Or if you wanted to buy a new home with the proceeds, maybe they wouldn't want to go along with it. If you have a situation like that, then maybe it's not a good idea to put your house in the irrevocable trust if you thought that you may want to sell it. Now, some people come into my office and they'll say, Tom, this is the house I was born in. I want to die in it. I have my tomato plants planted in the backyard. I love my neighbors. I love the soil. This was my great-grandfather's house. I had one lady I did some business with. She was like 97 years of age. She said she was born in this house. She wants to die in this house. I believed her, okay? She lived in the house her whole life. She didn't want to leave. So in those situations, the irrevocable trust would be fine. That's what would own the house, and the person would have a life estate that always have no chance to live there. So that's basically how irrevocable trusts work. Now, one of the problems that has popped up recently is, can I put a reverse mortgage on my home if it's in a irrevocable trust? And some of the banks have allowed it and some have say no. But I found an easy way to get around it, folks. What you do is this. Let's say if I have an irrevocable trust that owns my home, and I have a life estate, meaning that I have a right to live there my whole life, but I need to borrow some money. I need some extra money to live on. My Social Security and whatever my savings are, they're not working out. It's not as much as I need. Well, you could deed the house from the irrevocable trust to the beneficiaries. Let's say that you have 4 kids. You just deed the house to the 4 kids subject to your life estate. If you do that, you qualify for a reverse mortgage. They'll let you have a reverse mortgage if you have a life estate and if the owners of the house are individuals. Now, the individuals will have to sign the mortgage when you apply for the reverse mortgage, but they are not personally liable for it. Only the house is. So that's a way of getting around the loophole that says that some people feel says that you cannot put a house that has an irrevocable trust. You cannot borrow reverse mortgage with that. Well, what you do effectively, you're taking it out of the irrevocable trust because you're deeding it to the beneficiaries, subject to your interest as a life tenant, and then you qualify. I've done it many times. It works, and it's a strategy that the secondary market approves as far as reverse mortgages are concerned. Now, the other question is can I use an irrevocable trust for my cash assets? I've talked about using it for real estate. Can I use it for cash assets? And how does it work? What benefit does it do? What effect does it do? Well, folks, you could do this. You could take your cash assets. Let's say you have $500,000, but you're concerned someday you might go into a nursing home. Let's say your mother and your father and all your sisters and brothers have gone into a nursing home, and they've all lost the family fortune, and you're getting older, and you say it's going to happen to me too. It's, folks, we call it genetics. If you have good genetics, things work out pretty good for you. If your genes aren't quite as good, sometimes you go the way the relatives went. So what happens here, if you have that situation, you could put all your money in the irrevocable trust. Say the trust is owned by my children, but you could say the income from it, the dividends, the interest, the profits, they all go to you. So that gives you retirement income, but the principal is untouchable by anybody else except the ultimate beneficiaries. So if you went into a nursing home, the nursing home can't take that. All they could do is take the income and not the principal. So that's a good use of an irrevocable trust if you have enough money. And folks, how much is enough money? Well, different people, some people, $200,000 is more than enough money. And in some people, a couple of $1 million is not enough money. It depends upon what your comfort level is, what your expenses are, what you need to float your own boat. Now, let's talk about revocable trust. What's a revocable trust? A revocable trust is something that you can revoke, you can change. And I gave the example earlier in the show. Let's say I set up a trust and I leave it to my 4 children, and all of a sudden I am dissatisfied with my 4 children. Maybe one of them has let me down, or one of them has become a ward of the state, or a prisoner, or has a medical disability. I might want to amend my trust to make my trust to have a special needs trust for one of my children. Instead of just the money go there, maybe I take the money and I spoon feed them the funds over years. Maybe I say, well, I don't want to give money I have 4 children, I don't want to give it to all 4. One of them won $2 or $3 million in the lottery, doesn't need any more money, so I want to give it to the other 3. Or, and this happens a lot, and this is sort of a nice thing to do, if you live long enough, you might say, I don't want to give it all to my children. I want to give maybe 50% to my children and 50% to my grandchildren, or 100% to my grandchildren. It depends how old you are, folks. If you live to be in your middle 90s, your kids are usually in their 70s. And the truth of the matter is, if your kids aren't financially set when they're in their 70s, maybe they never will be. But the one that makes a big difference in life, if you can take someone who's 25, 30 years old, and you give them a good lump of cash, and they tell them to use it as a down payment on a house, you may change their life. If I take somebody who's 70 years old who has $300,000 in the bank and I give them another $100,000, it's not going to make any difference, folks. It's just one more statement to look at. So on a revocable trust, the beauty of it is you can revoke it, you can change it, and don't leave yourself cash poor. When you go to an attorney or a financial planner or an accountant or whatever, and you're making up some kind of finance plan for yourself, a lot of people get themselves afraid. They're afraid of paying estate taxes. They're afraid of paying medical bills or Medicaid bills. And then sometimes the attorney, the financial planner, will have you tie up all your money in irrevocable trust or tie them all up in some kind of annuities that you can't touch the money. Make sure that you keep an adequate amount of cash assets that you can enjoy your life, that you can go on a vacation, that you can give one of your children or your grandchildren a wedding present, or pay for somebody's college education, or buy somebody a car, or better yet, buy yourself a new car, okay? You don't want to leave yourself poor because, folks, and I've been doing this for 42 years, and I have a keen observation of it, we don't mind growing older. No matter what the other TV shows show you, you see all kinds of women on TV and men on TV, and they're getting gray hair or whatever like that, and they're getting all upset about it, and they're getting a few wrinkles, and they're getting all upset about it. The idea, folks, is Madison Avenue doesn't have it right. We don't mind growing older because we know what the alternative is. We just don't want to be old and broke. So make sure when you do your financial plans, you leave yourself enough liquidity so that you won't be old and broke. Now, I have a couple more minutes to talk in the show, and we talked about irrevocable trust and revocable trust. I'm going to talk about two other items you should have in your estate plan, maybe three other items. Folks, everybody out there that's in their 60s should have some type of power of attorney. And the power of attorney, if you're married, usually you give it to your spouse, and you say, look, the spouse, you can do anything for me financially that you want to do for me. And that's a power of attorney, and it's in writing, and it's formal. Then you name one of your children. You say, if my spouse is incompetent or deceased, then I name somebody else as my power of attorney. And those are excellent things to have. If you don't have one of those and you become mentally incompetent and somebody has to make financial decisions for you, they have to go get a conservatorship. They got to go to court. They got to spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. And then after that, any financial decision that's a major financial decision will need the court approval. If you want to keep the courts out of your life, establish a power of attorney. Now, sometimes people will say, well, I don't quite trust the other person that I want to give the power of attorney to. But I trust them and I don't trust them. Or I want to make all my financial decisions myself while I'm capable of making them. In that case, you can do a power of attorney that some people call a springing power of attorney. It says that I give my son, let's say, a power of attorney to do things for me, but only if I'm declared mentally incompetent. If I'm mentally competent, there's no power of attorney. So that's a type of power of attorney that they have. Now, pretty much all the powers of attorney that attorneys do today, they call them durable powers of attorney. And what a durable power of attorney means, it stays in effect even if you become mentally disabled. Now, folks, in my mind, there's no reason to have any power of attorney unless it's durable, because that's when you really want it in effect. You want it when you're mentally incompetent, that's when you want that power of attorney to be in effect. So that's a very important power of attorney. The other thing everyone should have is a healthcare proxy. And the healthcare proxy says, if I am incompetent for some reason, I could be unconscious, I could be disabled, I could be in extreme pain. If I am incompetent to make an informed medical decision on my own, then I appoint somebody else to make that decision. That's a very important thing to do, because picture it, folks. You get in a car accident, you have 7 brothers and sisters, and you have your mother and father, and everybody's there. And all of a sudden, the doctor wants to make a decision. Should he take your leg off or not take your leg off? And you've got 7 brothers and sisters, and 4 of them say, I think they should take the leg off. 3 of them don't say they don't want it. And let's say your mother and father say they abstain, they don't want to vote. Who does the doctor listen to? If you have a healthcare proxy, the doctor only goes to one person and says, what do you think? These are the odds. This is what I can do. What would you like us to do? And that way the medical proxy works. The other thing that a medical proxy gives, it gives the person that holds the proxy the right to go and get a copy of your medical records. I use this example all the time. Let's say you live in the South Shore. You get in an automobile accident somewhere in the Cape, and they fly you to Boston. And all of a sudden, the doctors in Boston want a copy of all your medical records from your local physician or from your local hospital. The doctors can't get that. They can't get it without a healthcare proxy. Excuse me. Actually, the document they call it is a HIPAA document, HIPPA, and that's signed with the modern healthcare proxies today. And the final document that everybody should have as the completion of their wills, and of their trust, their powers of attorney, and their healthcare proxy is a will. And even if you have a trust, some people say, Tom, what do I need a will for? I have a trust. All my property is owned in the trust. I don't have to worry about probating my estate. Everything's fine. Well, folks, a will names your executor. And the executor is the person who's in charge of your personal property and your real property when you die. Anything that's not in a trust. And when you die, folks, you really don't know what you're going to own when you die. Maybe there's a lawsuit that you own. Maybe you got killed in a car accident and now you have a lawsuit. That was something that you never envisioned when you had the trust. Maybe you inherited some money from your parents or your great-grandparents or your brothers and sisters, whatever, and you didn't have a chance to put it in your own name. So the will gives somebody the power to make decisions, pay your bills, liquidate your estate, distribute your assets to who they're supposed to distribute to. That's all the things that a will has to do. Now, in many cases, if you have done a good job on estate planning and you labeled everything under your trust, maybe the will doesn't even have to be probated. But you still have the will just in case. So when we do an estate today, what do? We do a will, we do a power of attorney, a healthcare proxy. If they own real estate and the people are going to live in their house the rest of their life, I'll put the house in an irrevocable trust. If they own personal property like money in the bank, we put it in a revocable trust. If you have estates, right now, there is no estate tax federally unless you have more than $5 million. Folks, there's no estate tax between husband and wives, and they have a special exemption for at least this year that says estates of up to $10 million will not be taxed, providing there is a husband and wife. And if one died, they have a concept called portability that makes it so that the survivor could have a $10 million estate and not be taxed. That's pretty good news for the federal estate tax. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts estate tax ends if you have under $1 million when you die and you're a single person, no tax. If you have more than $1 million and you're single when you die, there's going to be a tax. The tax is roughly 10%, and it goes up to 15% of everything over the $1 million. That's a rough way of figuring out what the tax is. If you're a married couple and you left it all to your spouse, there's no tax. You can make that $1 million exemption a $2 million exemption if you use a legal maneuver called a credit shelter trust. And that's allowable, and you can stretch your assets between two trusts if you're married, a husband's trust and a wife's trust. And if you do that, you can have a $2 million. It effectively works out that if the last person to die could have as much as $2 million under their control and pay no estate tax. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show, folks, and good luck with your revocable trust and irrevocable trust. And remember, don't be in any hurry to use your will or your healthcare proxies, but just keep them in a safe place if you need them. Thanks for watching.